Good morning, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends. It is my great pleasure to welcome you here today to our business breakfast with very topical topic, energy prices. We have a couple of non-Slovak speakers here, so the whole discussion will be held in English without translation. I hope it's okay for everybody. First of all, I would like to say that this is supposed to be very informal gathering and discussion. So if you have questions, please ask for the microphone. You will be allowed to pose a question to our speakers directly, or you can use Slido. There will be a hashtag #MChamEnergy, so we can read your question if you are a little bit shy to ask it directly. Now I would like to introduce our two distinguished speakers. First of all, Andrej Juris, who is the chairman of the Slovak Regulatory Authority for Network Industries. Andrej Juris is a very professional and competent manager. He's been in the energy business most of his professional life, I suppose. He worked for the Západoslovenská energetika. He worked for the anti-monopoly regulatory authority here in Slovakia. He's got degree in energy management. So I think we are very happy that we can have him today with us. And the second one, Mr. Juraj Krajcár, who is the chairman of Západoslovenská Energy, is correct? He's also very experienced. He's been in the business for a long time, and also he's got experience in the sales industry, and also in the other network industries like Slovak Telecom. These two people, I think, are very competent to answer your questions. And I see only young people and not many gray hair here, and not wrinkles. So it seems like this is something what is probably not so much bothering you, but I mean energy prices and energy price developments. But I think it is something what you can read in the headlines every morning, that there is something which is sort of unprecedented. We hear about the war behind the border. Our neighbor is going through very difficult times, and it's having a big impact on the global energy market. But these trends of the rising energy prices probably started a little bit earlier than the war erupted. We saw the pandemic wrought havoc to our economies, but when the pandemic was going somehow to die out, the prices of energies went up. Why is it so? This is one of the things which we would like to understand, and we will ask our speakers. So I also told our speakers who is here in the room, and I suppose that we have quite many people who are taking decisions regarding their budgets in their companies. So please ask questions so that you can make more informed decisions regarding next year and the years ahead of us. So with that, I would like to ask the first question to our speakers, and it is like, why are we having this energy crisis? Is there something which was not expected? Is there something what can be really attributed to specific factors which are driving the prices, or is it something what we do not really understand what's going on? Maybe with you, Mr. Juris, if I can start with you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. It's a big pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for invitation. And you started with the most difficult question. So hopefully there will be easier and easier questions by towards the end of this meeting. I think there is no single and simple answer to this, why we are facing the energy crisis. I think there are many, many factors and many, many views, what is important and what is less important. And I would not like to give you a summary of all these things which you can hear or read in various newspapers or studies, but kind of the fundamental aspects which, as a regulator, which we see and which we discuss also in our regulatory platforms within the EU, basically is a lack of supply. Last couple of months or last year, it's a lack of supply of available gas, especially because of lower supply from Russia. Even before the Ukrainian Russian aggression into Ukraine, we could see the significant increase in gas prices already in the second half of last year, and it has been just continuing up and up. Then there was quite a lot of factors, or several small factors, related to the lack of supply of electricity. I think sometimes during the last year it was not enough wind in the North Sea. Some retirement or kind of repair of generation capacity in various parts of Europe. And this year there was a big chunk of capacity of nuclear power in France being down because of maintenance and retirement of German nuclear power. These are many things, and we can just continue. What I would like to stress is it's kind of a portfolio of factors, but the most important thing we believe is that there is a complete lack of coordination of energy policies in Europe between or among member states. What I mean by that is that, okay, there are some frameworks, EU frameworks, and various regulations and so on, but each member state is making its own decision about what type of capacity. Now I mean especially the electricity generation capacity, how to promote generation capacity, what are the policies, how to install or develop the framework to promote more and more capacity, and we just don't have enough. We just don't have enough generation capacity, especially the new one in Europe for the last number of years.
Sorry if I may interrupt you. Why is it so? Why we don't have this enough of generation capacity? Didn't the managers, CEOs expect that there will be a need for such a generation? Maybe Mr. Krajcár, you would like to say a couple of words?
Good morning, also from my side. So what's happened in the past several years in Europe, specifically from 2015, 2016, there was switch of coal generation in a total capacity 57 gigawatt hours installed capacity. It means in practice that this coal, it means the overall generation which is done by these coal generators is supply the biggest country in the Europe, and this is Germany. It means that we are missing from 2016 overall generated capacity, which is equaling German consumption. So this is number one. Number two, yes, renewable was developed, but almost in the same capacity, but you know that we don't have guaranteed production from renewables. And in a specific times, like Andrej mentioned, we are not able to simply supply our networks with the reasonable volumes of the energy. So this is the main reason which is coming from the historical definition. You know, everybody knows about the Green Deal. Everybody knows about the moving from the gray or dark to the green, but this transition wasn't done properly. So this is the main problem.
So we don't have journalists here. We haven't invited any. I hope there is no like someone like an incognito here. We don't have politicians here. We can be politically incorrect. Can we go back to the decision of Energiewende 2011 when Angela Merkel, you work for a company which is having a German shareholder, So I suppose you know quite a lot about Energiewende. When Fukushima happened and there was a decision to phase out nuclear in 2011, is it something which really we are bearing fruit right now of this decision?
Not really, because the total installed capacity in German nukes is just only 8 giga, and I told almost 60 giga was switched off. So this is not a direct implication if we're talking just about the German nukes. But whole movement was quite heavy, and probably some of you remember that in that time when Mrs. Merkel made the decision, the Green Party was in. So it was some political, let's say, trade-off in that time. And you know that if the German economy is the biggest economy, so influence to overall Euro policies is, well, let's say, by definition there. So yeah, it's happened. It's no time to criticize, but we need to find the quick solution from actual movement. The problem is that if we're talking about the energy business, this is extremely capex heavy industry for a long term. So we cannot, besides the political decisions and political influence, if we want to come back to the, let's say, the old standards, we need to have a couple of years as a time to do that.
Are there at the moment projects in the pipeline which would somehow, you know, make up for this deficiency of the capacity? So even if we, you know, end up with being dependent on the Russian gas, which is going to happen rather soon, I suppose, or rather sooner than later, will we be able to withstand, you know, this kind of bad weather for the next 5 years? You said that it's very capex intensive, you know, industry. So if we have LNG terminals, if we have more gas available, it's not going to still somehow, based on what you just said, compensate for this lack of coal electricity generated from coal. Is that correct?
What's happened this summer? It was, let's say, combination of whole factors which coming in one momentum. So Andrej mentioned that there was lack of capacity in French nukes, definitely. EDF is the biggest European producer of electricity. So there was two effects. One was weather. It was very warm weather. So you cannot produce on the highest capacity if you are not able to cool them via water. This is number one. Number two, there was maintenance problems there, and it's still there. So during the summer, we missed additional 30 giga installed capacity. So half of previous switch off capacity. This is number one. Number two, we have extremely dry weather. So it means the whole hydro system in Norway, in the Alps, and in the Balkan was completely off. The second thing or third thing, as you read in a newspaper, the main river in a industrial river in Germany, Rhone, was completely out of let's say moving goods within the river. So all these kinds of things together with Russian gas come into the one momentum, and this momentum was really shock for Europe.
Mr. Juris?
Just to add what Juraj said, and to your question, whether we see the projects, I don't see them. I don't see enough generation projects in Europe, and I believe I'm not alone. Just to give you an idea about, Juraj mentioned some numbers in tens of gigawatts of capacity which is being retired. If you take a nuclear power station, it generates electricity 80% of the time on average. So if you take a year, so 80% of the time during the year, it runs and generates electricity. The remaining 20% is maintenance and so on and so on. Solar, for example, it generates electricity about 10% in our geographic location. Yeah. So for 1 megawatts of capacity of nuclear power, you need about 8, if my math is correct, 8 megawatts of solar to replace it 1-to-1. So we need a lot of new generation capacity, and it's just not coming despite all the support and so on. What I'm saying is not to kind of crave or say, oh, we are losing all this fantastic fossil fuel generation capacity. No, this is gone. In a medium and long term, these things needs to go out because of the climate and all these other factors, which we know. But the point is, if we are to replace them and keep our industrial base, like here we have in Slovakia, and our way of life in Europe, we need a lot of new capacity. We need a lot of new capacity on the central level, so kind of a system level. We need a lot of new capacity on your level as industrial customers. I believe most of you represent some kind of a business, which with some industrial or other type of activity. We need to have a lot of decentralized generation on the level of households, small businesses, and so on. It's not the question, I believe, of building new huge parks or power plants which replace 1,000 megawatts of nuke in one location with 8,000 megawatts of solar. That's a nonsense. But we need to have a kind of a very coordinated European-wide effort and urgency. And this is, I believe, a problem at the moment. Urgency to really smooth out and kind of streamline all the necessary regulations, which is also our job, all the necessary permitting, all the necessary whatever guides installation of new generation capacity. So we build it. And it's not a question of 1 or 2 years. It's a question of maybe 3 to 10 years.
Are there the right signals for the investors? Do they have the right incentives with the current prices? Do you think that they are going to take these kind of risk or decisions? Mr. Krajcár, you come from the private sector, so you probably know whether you are going to invest more. I remember that there were a lot of discussions about having new plants even here in Slovakia, apart from Mochovce, and they are basically not happening. Do you think that right now we have the right environment to invest?
The whole environment for investment is belonging closer to Andrej, but I will comment one thing, Mochovce. Mochovce 3 and 4 is total installed capacity below 1 giga. So it's, and everybody knows that this is a 15 years project. What's happening right now in Europe, that nuclear is coming back to the focus. Everybody probably heard about the permission process in PAX 2 in Hungary. There is a huge movement in the Czech Republic, specifically in between company Czech and Czech government, and all the procedures is already started. So if we are hosting by MCHM, that there is a huge opportunity also for Westinghouse as a flagship store in the nuclear business in the US. And the several movements are already happening in France, in Israel. So there is a renaissance. Sorry, there is a renaissance of nuclear. I truly believe. I'm not believe that there will be a big installation. So it means that the Russian type of nuclear generation, it means 1,000 megawatts. It means 1 giga. We are moving from the big ones to these modular nuclear generators. So we discussing in some places capacity, installed capacity about the 10-15 megawatts up to 30 megawatts. So nuclear is back. This is number one. Number two, Russian gas is out. Russian gas is dead. This is my true beliefs. Gas will remain for some part of the transition. Definitely, gas is moving from the natural gas to the LNG. LNG becoming a global commodity, definitely. So if we're discussing Europe/Slovakia, there will be a huge fight in between the China, Southern America and other big continents, big countries on a global LNG market. What is necessary, definitely, this is connection to Andrej, that the green generation, we have a young star hydrogen. So this is something which will come to our generation portfolio. What is necessary, prepare whole politics, and this is definitely responsibility of the local government and regulatory office to increase installed capacity in a green generation. And we are not there. We are not ready.
Thank you. So you said that basically there is no reason to criticize past decisions. Let's move forward, and some of the, I would say, recommendations you came up with are maybe for the medium and long term. But what about the next year? What about the medium term in terms of like 2-3 years? What can we expect and what can be done? There are discussions about price ceilings. There is a discussion about capping the price of gas, about some European decision and coordination of these policies. Then at the same time, we read about the new energy law being approved by the government here in Slovakia. What do you think of it? Like, should we start with really coordinated European approach? Or if there is a lack of this European approach, should we really do something locally? What is it? We have many businesses struggling here. You read in the news, Milan Vesely, the head of Slovalco, is complaining basically the government let them, die. There is no support. At the same time, of course, we would like to transform the economy. We know that maybe aluminium production in Slovakia is not sustainable in the medium term, in the long term, but still many companies are really struggling to pay the bills. And at the same time, we have private consumers here who are paying for their households. Do you have any suggestion what should be done? And maybe Mr. Juris will follow your suggestion and try to implement it.
This is direct question to Andrej, so
I'm listening.
Let's go.
Go ahead. I will write down.
So maybe Mr. Juris, what
to
is
start.
really in the pipeline? What's going on, so that we really know that it's going to somehow shield, our industries and households against this price shock?
Okay. You are not going with the simplicity of your questions down, but it's actually increasing. But just on the light note, it's a good question, an important question, of course. Because we can talk about new capacity and doing all these new installations, but it's a question of kind of a medium term, if I may say. It's number of years until some big impact will be felt in the economy and in the whole society we live in. But really, it's important that we survive this coming winter. I think that's absolutely a must for us as citizens and people. Human beings, if I may say, and for us as businesses, institutions, basically the whole society as a whole, Slovakia, EU, and so on. And I would like to frame it in my own view. We are at war, kind of war. I'm not saying necessarily militarily, which is just next door in Ukraine. But we are at war in terms of fight for supplies, fight for resources, and basically facing the absolutely extreme situations in the market in order to get enough quantity of energy for us as a society, and at the prices or at the costs which would not completely ruin us at the end of winter or at the end of next year. Yeah, I think this is the absolute kind of the task and situation we are facing. And in my own view, again, my own personal view, I don't believe this is kind of a shared feeling in kind of a wider type of community, if I may say, whether it's politicians, experts, whoever, even the whole society. That we are really in a very extreme situation we are facing, and we need to, in my view, take also very extraordinary measures. And now I'm getting to your question. And I think this whole situation evolved so quickly that it was absolutely impossible to come up with a plan and be prepared for something which is absolutely unexpected. As a result, I believe it's kind of a multi-stage kind of evolution or development. There is an ongoing discussion at the EU level. We saw there is already an outcome about something like a price cap on electricity. It's not exactly price cap, it's kind of price cap to somehow calm down the prices of electricity on the markets and get some revenues from the generations, these infra-marginal generations, which are kind of water, solar, and so on, to kind of finance whatever government programs will be needed to compensate high energy costs. And now there is a lot of discussion, and I believe it will be very soon resolved about some type of price cap for gas. And in my own view, it's even more important than electricity because of all what has happened, that gas is really the price setter in both electricity and in other types of commodities. And if we find out something workable in there, it should calm down the market, and it should somehow stabilize the prices, at least for the upcoming winter.
Maybe, sorry to interrupt you, but one provocative question. You said there is a problem with supply. So there is a lack of electricity, lack of gas. But if you put a price cap, it's not going to decrease demand.
And I think that's the tough part of solving or searching for solution. That it's easy to impose a price cap. Even me, as a regulator, I can say, if we can do it through our legislation, we say tomorrow the prices will be not 100 but 10. Yeah, all price of electricity will be 10. Yeah, and we'll just declare it for not only for household but for the whole industry in Slovakia. Let's say, I'm speaking here hypothetically. Please don't take me. Yeah, okay. But it's easy, in my view, to say some kind of administrative nice price if there is no supply. If there is not a commodity which someone would be willing to supply. And I think we are facing this on the European level with gas. And this is why the discussion about the price cap of gas takes so long, and it's not so easy. It's not like resolved. So it's a combination, at least from the materials we see, it's a combination of setting some level of price cap, which will be somewhat movable. It will not be a firm number, but it should be somehow movable. It should be, at least based on the working level documents which we saw, it should be mostly applied to the so-called pipeline gas, which is somehow stuck in the pipeline. You cannot really move gas from pipeline to something else. It should not apply to LNG, which is very flexible. As Juraj said, it's kind of a global commodity. And there should be also kind of a joint purchase arrangement within the EU. So there is a kind of aggregation of demand and stronger purchasing power of EU towards the supplier of gas to the EU. And hopefully also some kind of a voluntary discussion and agreement with friendly gas importers like Norway and Algeria. So Europe can find some friendly and reasonable arrangements with these countries. So it's a number of parameters. It's not like, as I said, just setting the price cap and everything will be resolved. It's just a small piece, a really small piece of the whole puzzle. And but I'm very, very hopeful that something like that will come out, because it should, at the most, somehow calm the market. We need to calm the market for winter, and kind of prepare kind of the timing, and a little bit open the room for thinking about the medium term, what will happen in summer next year, and especially how we can prepare for next winter, because this is equally important as this winter. So that's EU level, and I will go quickly, so there could be questions. Of course, there is a whole bunch of discussion at the Slovak Republic level, if I can say. We as a regulator, we are in some discussion on that. There is an ongoing discussion about a special deal for households. I think it's already has been published that there should be a special arrangement, special agreement with Slovenské elektrárne to provide low price electricity to households. And now all these details are being discussed very intensively, and hopefully this will be finalized. And then there is a whole bunch of discussion about special kind of similar or something similar arrangement for small and medium businesses, for public institutions and non-profits, but also some kind of a compensation scheme for the large industry. But this is not something we are as regulator directly involved in. Now, what I say my personal view, I think something similar what Czech Republic has prepared and has adopted, that's something would be very, I think, applicable within Slovakia.
Mr. Krajcár, you seem to...
Probably one technical comment. Why is gas so important? If we're coming to the electricity prices, the pricing in electricity is done via commodity. So it means that the gas is the primary commodity which is priced in the electricity prices. So if we're discussing that on a European level, that we need to have a price cap, not just because supply to the industrial customers, but definitely to via price cap on the gas, capping electricity prices. Because we have something which we call it technically merit order in our business. So the higher commodity is ending the price of electricity, and in these times is the gas. So it means the gas is the main driver why we're having such a prices in electricity. This is number one. Number two, I have one personal wish to you and to everybody. We're discussing why we're discussing this lack of capacity, installed capacity to produce. Yes, it's already happened, but how we can come out from this pressure? It's simply savings, 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 savings. On a personal level, on a business level, if we will be able to save 15, 20, 25%, we will jump out from this pressure, and we will buying time to prepare all necessary steps, what we're discussing right now. Doesn't matter if it will be regulatory steps in, it will be a new support scheme for a new production, and etc., etc. So savings, specifically in this winter, is a key factor how to survive.
Okay, I think this is very interesting to hear from someone who is selling actual electricity. More savings will help us, but I totally agree with you that this is going to get us through these difficult times. But of course, if you have a company which is big electricity consumer, 20-25%, it's really a lot. So maybe if you have some suggestions what could be done in that respect, we can also discuss this. You want to react?
I want to react because yes, of course, I'm working for a company who's supplying households and industrial companies. But what is the actual situation? There is an absolute lack of liquidity on the market, so we are not able to buy electricity for you. This is a reality. This is reality. There is no good. There is no electricity on the market. There is a one and only liquid market, and this is a spot market. We are not able to buy on a wholesale market, on a forward products, electricity and transfer to your businesses and to your households. So this is something which is in these days a reality. I'm sorry to say that I will be not very optimistic during the winter time, that the liquidity problem will remain during the winter. We will see what will be after the Q1, what will be the situation on the wholesale market. But definitely liquidity problem is a dominant problem besides the pricing. This is a dominant problem in a technical discussion what we're having in the industry. So this is not question in these days to fight on the market. The question in these days is find a solution and help everybody. It doesn't matter if we are citizens or industrial businesses.
Just maybe to give our guests here perspective, you said that there is only, the spot price, and it's 285 for today per megawatt hour, if I'm correct. But from what
it's a good price, to be honest, because 26th of August in Slovakia on a forward market there was €1,001.50. So it's
which is
quite a reasonable
insane,
price.
insane. But given the price for which Slovenské elektrárne sold their electricity for the next year, published in the newspapers, which is approximately €85, this is really a huge difference. And then we come back to the deal which you mentioned also with Slovenské elektrárne and ex-minister Sulik, when the price guaranteed was €61.2 per megawatt hour for households. Is it going to happen? This is probably a question I'm asking like a private consumer. Am I going to get this deal? I read an interview with Mr. Hirman, and he said this is not going to happen. It's going to be different. So how different is it going to be? Mr. Juris, you probably know.
Probably this question should be to Minister Hirman if he said so. So I think none of us here can say whatever he has to say. But I believe and I hope as a citizen and as a regulator it will happen. Again, I believe it should happen. Because otherwise we will see an enormous increase in household prices. I mean, if electricity is traded on a forward markets now around 400, 500 euros, which will be priced into the regulated prices, when today the price of commodity, the corresponding price of commodity is this 61.2 euros per megawatt hour, it's how much? 7-8 times more, 500 versus 61 euros. So if this is priced into the electricity prices for household, this is in my view it will be a disaster. I mean, how many households can pay electricity, which will be, I don't know, 5-6 times more? Maybe people who are well off and so on, yes, but how much of population is that? 10-20% at most. Even the not only the socially vulnerable customers, also kind of a middle income level people will have a problem if their bills increase by 1,000, 2,000 or 3,000 euros on an annual basis. So I believe and I hope and I wish and I pray and all these kind of verbs, if I may say, that some kind of deal with Slovenské elektrárne will be finalized. Whether it will be at this price or somewhat higher doesn't matter, because we are facing the electricity of 500 euros versus something about 62, maybe a little bit higher. So this kind of, in my view, a must.
So if I make a comment on that, we're touching price structure if we're discussing 500 or 61 euro. This is just pure commodity, and there is an additional price components which is coming to the end price, and this is a transmission fee, distribution fee, nuclear fee, green fee, and etc. etc. So what we probably can say that we are, because together with Andrej, we are part of the working group around the Mr. Minister, Mr. Hirman. So we had and have quite intensive discussion. So if we're discussing just pure commodity, I truly believe that this deal with Slovenské elektrárne will happen. But additional components is still under the discussion, and this is the main role is in Andrej's hands. But I'm really believing that we will be successful and we will come to the successful end.
Okay, there is also a new energy law, which is saying that in the worst case scenario, there might be some nationalization, of the electricity. You suggested that, some drastic measures will be needed. Is this one of them? Is it going to happen? And we still have not discussed really European solutions. So is it compatible with what's going on in the EU, or is it really the last resort? If nothing happens in the EU, there is no common decision, then we will be forced to somehow take care of our own national interests. Is it correct?
In my view, we are in the situation where we need to prepare measures and draft measures and finalize the measures on several levels. Yeah, as I mentioned, there is an EU level discussion, measures being discussed, finalized, adopted. Some are still in the workings. We need to make to do the measures at the level of the member states, so mostly the government and the parliament. And we, as a regulator, myself and my team, we are of course looking at the other types of measures which we have in our hands, like what I mentioned, regulation of infrastructure, basically distribution transmission fees, other types of price components which enter into the end user price for households, but also for you as businesses. Like, for example, the cost of ancillary services and so on and so on, but I will not bore you with the detail. So we are basically working on these various levels in parallel, and of course, because of the shortness of time, it's very difficult to wait until one particular moment they did, and everything should kind of be in one space. So I see this law as kind of a very, very important framework, legal framework, for which gives the ability to the government to come up with some extraordinary measures. And only when we see the particular measure, we can judge whether this is against or the EU or not against the EU, whether it's kind of whatever we could see in the newspapers, we are cutting off ourselves from the EU or whatever. I think at the moment this is very, very kind of how to say, overreaction in my view. Of course, there are a number of issues and questions, but it's really important, as I said, in my view, we are in kind of war and we need extraordinary measures. But we need at the end, it's really important how exactly these measures will be formulated and adopted in detail.
I will add some technical comment on that, if this is against or not against the European system or European law. The energy system in Europe is connected. We are technically and business-wise connected from the France till Ukraine, from the Denmark to the Italy. So there is a physical flow of electricity, how the electricity is coming from the production facility to the end customer. So this is number one. So we are not a solo country. We are not an island. So this is number one. Number two, if you are having a production facility, for example, nuclear facility like in Jaslovské Bohunice, you are based from the business perspective, you are hedging this produced electricity in a 3 years cascade. So all electricity which is already produced in Slovenské elektrárne or doesn't matter in other facilities are already hedged for 2023, 2024, and partially 2025. And what is the technical possibilities how you can sell or hedge this electricity? You can go to the exchange, to the energy exchange, and you are selling to the counterparty. And this electricity will be produced in the future and will be delivered in the future. So the whole production is already hedged. So this is a technical thing. And the problem is that Slovenské elektrárne is one of the smallest production facilities in the Europe. And if this electricity will be somehow not delivered to the counterparty, I cannot imagine physically that the smallest production facility will do that as a precedence. It must be somehow connected to the others. So yes, this is the, let's say, state protection, I would say, in last resort, but technically it will damage whole European wholesale market. So this is not really easy thing to do that. Yes, of course, in an absolute emergency situation, I can imagine. It, of course, needs to be somehow discussed and prepared compensation mechanism. In the end, is the discussion about the budget. We're discussing billions in this case.
So it's basically a nuclear option which you are not going to use, but just in case you have to be ready, as Mr. Juris said. We have a question on Slido, setting price caps on electricity prices or gas seems to be a preferred measure by businesses and public, but won't it distort the prices even more? So basically, I think this is something what we already discussed, but maybe you can answer directly.
I'm happy to add. I think it's a good question. We are talking about the price cap on electricity and gas on the so-called wholesale level, at the kind of a market level where these various producers and importers meet with traders and businesses, suppliers, and purchase the gas and trade, and also with some of the perhaps large industrial users. Yes, in the medium and long term, any kind of price cap basically distorts the market, and especially if the price cap is too low, there will be no supply, or there will be very little supply, and there will be a shortage, or there will be a black market at the end. I'm speaking generally. So in the kind of normal situation, in a competitive market, price cap is nonsense. But we are not in a competitive market, and we are not in a normal situation. So a price cap, in my view, is something which should calm down the market. It should give the signal that some kind of excesses, which we are seeing, especially in the gas price at the moment, are kind of not acceptable. To find some level of the price cap on the electricity side, the Commission looked at the so-called LCOE, levelized cost of electricity, which is kind of a full cost, including the reasonable profit of building a new power plant of certain types. And they set it on these 180 euros per megawatt hour. And I think something similar is being looked at the gas. So it's not about kind of crushing the suppliers or generators or importers to the death, if symbolically speaking, with some crazily low price, but to give them recovery of the costs, some level of reasonable profit, and to cut off the excesses in the short term. And as I said, in the short term, to somewhat give us a breathing space this winter. Again, I will use some military parallel. Now we see this crazy war in Ukraine. As I said, I believe we are in attack in this kind of war. So we need to kind of stop the attack, to give us the time to breathe, to gather the strength, and then to kind of prepare the proper measures for the next summer and next year. Yeah. So I see the price caps as this kind of measure.
So the terminology which you use was also used by Joseph Stiglitz in his interview for Slovak newspaper, when he said that basically Europe is in the energy war, definitely, with Russia, but the war should eventually end. So how should we move forward? Because he also said that the market basically was functioning for good times, but really is not functioning in the bad times, and we can see that. Does it mean that more regulation will be needed? So even if we get through this winter, there will be tougher regulation, and can we expect some maybe a wave of nationalization, or we can maybe expect really more control on the energy exchange? There will be different measures. Are we going through sort of 2008 crisis, after which a lot of new regulation was coming in? Is this the case?
Before Andrej will comment on that, it's really shocking that the guys from the open market asking for more regulation, and this is my example. So we will be not able to survive if the more regulation will not come. Andrej try to, let's say, design how the European Union come to the 180 price cap regulation on generation, on inframarginal generators. So this is something which is needed to survive. Sorry to say, but it's needed to survive. And it's, by the way, very helpful for a private sector and for an industrial sector. So number one, we are not in an ordinary, we are in the extraordinary situation. So definitely one of the quick win or quick learning will be extraordinary regulation. Second one, I truly believe that existing system of the wholesale market is not functioning. So we will face, hopefully next year, when the crisis or pressure on the top of the crisis will somehow disappear, some changes of the wholesale market system, how we are dealing with the commodities. And definitely this is the role of national regulator and also European regulator. What kind of measures, what kind of changes will be prepared, because the existing model is simply not functioning.
We have a couple of new questions from Slido. What would happen to our generation capacity if the situation in Ukraine were to deteriorate further and Russia stop their supplies of nuclear fuel? I suppose this is really a question maybe for Slovenské elektrárne. I suppose that they are diversifying already, you know, their nuclear fuel. We saw Minister Sulik coming to the airport and welcoming Russian fuel. So that basically we should be safe at least for 1 year, I suppose. But if anyone wants to take this question and say something about this, I think it is also a question like whether we should be so heavily dependent on nuclear. Because you said there is a nuclear renaissance, but in Slovakia, you know, if Mochovce 3 is already, you know, connected to the grid, it will be like, I don't know, 60-70%, or it is even maybe more. And there is still a discussion, okay, finalizing Unit 4 and maybe Bohunice 5. This is something we already have kind of some special purpose vehicle company which should develop this kind of project or get it ready. What do you think? Is it okay? Is it good for Slovakia to be so heavily dependent on nuclear?
I cannot be, let's say, neutral in this answer, because I'm a big fan of nuclear. So this is upfront. But what I'm not a technical guy in case of nuclear fuel. But what I know from the discussion from the CEO of Slovenské elektrárne, that there is 4 or 5 components, and there is just one component which needs to be delivered from the Rosatom. This is the Russian nuclear company. So other can be, let's say, used from the different sources. This is number one. Number two, we are speaking about the Russian technology in the nuclear power plants, but this is not one and only technology. And if you are combining different nuclear fuel with a different technology, I'm pretty sure that we can somehow escape from this problem. And the third, thanks God that we having Mochovce 3 in let's say connection phase. So it really helpful, not for a Slovak itself, but for a system stability in Middle and Central Europe system stability. So we're discussing a lot about the missing capacity, and every megawatt hour installed capacity is helpful in these days.
You said about a need for increasing the stability of the system, but there is also a need for more coordination on the EU level. So there is a question why there is a lack of will or coordination at the EU level to tackle the situation together. So there is a decision of the German government on top of the already approved 100 billion euro to be given to households and businesses. Additional 200, which is like the maximum. And there was a really strong, harsh criticism coming from Orban, even from Mario Draghi, which is very, you know, diplomatic, that this is not the way to go forward, that we are basically cannibalizing, you know, each other. So why do you think, and maybe, I don't know, Mr. Juris, you go to Brussels also to meet your colleagues, is there really a lack of will, or is it something that we cannot really agree what is the right decision? Or even worse, we were completely not prepared for it, as you said, and it really needs a lot of deliberation and careful thinking.
This is probably the most difficult question so far. Because it has a lot of dimensions, and I would start with the energy dimension, because that's something which I can kind of grasp. What is missing in Europe? We have, I think, in the last 10 plus years, we did a fabulous job as Europe in integrating energy markets, especially electricity markets. We are now, especially as Juraj said, here in Central Europe, we are not Slovak market, we are Central European markets involving all the neighboring countries, including Germany and so on and so on. So, and these markets function and has been functioning and delivered a lot of good results for all of us, either citizens or businesses. And I will touch a little bit on this nuclear thing. And I'm not much worried whether we have too much nuclear and so on, because in this big market which we are part of, just Germany retirement of nuclear capacity is larger than the whole installed capacity of whole Slovakia. Yep. So our 600 or 400 or 500 megawatts of new nuclear or 1,000 of new nuclear is a drop in the ocean. Yeah. So it's not really a question of looking purely on the on Slovak market, whether we have too much or too little nuclear, whatever else. But we are part of the integrated electricity market. What is missing and what is a problem and which has caught us as Europe these days is this basically complete uncoordination of energy policies, especially in building up new generation capacity and new capacities in energy sector generally. Because Germany has been doing its own decisions for good, for bad. We can have different opinions, but they made it, and it's always in any country kind of a political process, which is the result is at the end of political discussion and political process. And Germany has decided we want to have more or less pure renewables, and nuclear is no-go. Adios, yeah, and they worked on it 10 years with now disastrous effects on all of us. And each country is doing its own decision about how its energy sector should look like, but in a market which is integrated. So even decision of Slovakia about what we do here in our kind of garden of Slovak Republic has a potentially big impact on the overall market. So what is really missing, and I believe this is something which will be tackled now as kind of a medium measure. It will not save us for winter, but for the next couple of years, kind of coordination of and kind of new mechanism for supporting new generation capacity and new investment in the energy sector, with the focus on renewables, with the focus on energy security, and so on and so on. So I will not touch on the political things and so on. I mean, Europe as entity, it's kind of famously rather complex process with even complex decision making. I think we can see it in all kind of different issues, not only energy, and we just live in this kind of world, and we have to work with it. Yeah.
So basically, we need something what was mentioned when the commissioner. Maroš Šefčovič actually was having, a new position that we need some kind of energy union, So yes. there is like kind of, we have monetary union, we are thinking or speaking, and there is maybe something about the defense union. So we need kind of energy union. We can talk about this more, but I would like to keep this discussion practical, so some people who came here today, this morning, can take something tangible back to their offices. So I'm wondering, like, what can we expect? Everybody's talking about the winter 2022 is going to be really, really tough. But you partially mentioned that even next winter, we should be really worried, like winter 2023. What is in the pipeline? Can we expect that the prices will go down? I know that we don't have a crystal ball, it's very, very difficult to expect. But given all the long-term, medium-term trends which you are seeing, and both of you, you've been in the energy business, I don't know, 20, 30 years, so you've seen a lot. Probably not a perfect storm like we are facing right now, and it's kind of black swan, and maybe there will be new black swans coming. But can we expect that the situation after spring will stabilize and politicians at the end of the day, as many people say, that Europe will do at the end, as the last thing, the right decision. It will take the right decision, it will make a right decision. Is this going to improve the situation? Can we expect that in 1 year, when we sit here on this stage, the prices will be somehow stabilized? What would be your recommendation, maybe practical recommendation? Okay, weather the storm, which is really right now, but it's going to be better, or get even prepared for the worst times. Any recommendation?
If I may start, I think I'm sure Juraj has a lot of good recommendations as well. We can expect improvement only when we do measures and decisions which will kind of create conditions for that kind of improvement. Yeah, it's either and it's valid for business, for private life, but also for this kind of situation. So to be quite concrete, what we as a regulator can do, and we are thinking and kind of preparing, and it's in all different stages. What we would like to do, besides these extraordinary measures, which will really address, and I believe they will address, and I'm hopeful they will address kind of the critical issues of this winter, or let's say for the next 12 months. So we as a society can survive without losing too much of resources just to pay the bills. We are now working very intensively on kind of redesign of the energy, of the electricity market especially, and somehow to free up and simplify the rules for connection of new generation capacity, especially renewables. Because this is something which we, as an office, as a regulator, we have in hands. These are our rules which guides different parts of this process. So we would like to simplify the rules for the connection capacity, for how the connection process is done. We have some new powers within this new energy legislation which came in force in October, that we can also moderate disputes between the grid operators and the applicants for new generation. And there are a lot of disputes we can see. Now we have the power to moderate them and even resolve through some kind of a mediation process. So this is something which we are prepared, and we believe, first of all, the new market rules will be in place sometimes in March of next year, because there is also a legal deadline which we have to fulfill with these new rules, and also the new structure and new schemes of payments for grid and for connection should be in place on the 1st of January of 2023. So basically in a couple of months. Please do not expect revolution. It's an evolution, but we believe it will be an important step to free up this process. And also many of you and your businesses who are thinking about developing its own generation capacity or battery or some kind of a new solutions which this new legislation allow you to build, to optimize your energy use, to lower your bill and to kind of better serve your core business. So we would like to kind of redesign the ground rules for this.
So this is really good news. Sorry to interrupt you. Does it mean that the wind will start blowing just behind the border with Austria, also in Slovakia? We will see more wind farms here, or this is not going to happen? Because this is really kind of a sort of shock for many people who are coming for the first time to Slovakia from Švechat, that they don't see, the wind stops blowing in Slovakia. We don't have any wind farms, but maybe coming back to practice.
We have 4 turbines in Slovakia.
Okay, but it must be somewhere really high in the mountains that there is really wind, and we don't have, we do have a lot of sun and sunshine because there is a lot of solar farms, or relatively many solar farms here in Slovakia. But I really like what you said, because this is something what I personally encountered on my visits to our members, there were, questions coming from really plants, and they said, plant directors, we have, a big bill, and it was already like a year or 2 years ago. We pay big electricity bill, and we would like to have our solar panels on the rooftop, and it's not really feasible. The fees are simply destroying. Is it going to change? So can we say, well, go to Mr. Juris and his colleagues, and you will get, the permission?
It's already changed. We have in new legislation something which we call in local generator, lokalny zdroj, which you can put your solar under the roof, and you generate electricity which you consume on a local facility. So this is already happening. So the technical problem is that we are facing huge increase of these local generators, and we are dealing with the lack of installed capacity. So this is the practical outcome, that we have a lot of orders on the table, and time to installation is already 9 months up to 12 months. This is not just happening in the households rooftops, but also in the industrial rooftops. So this is already on place. So if you want to have more details, just drop me the email, and I will deal with this. So there is some restriction which is technically needed, but it's already booming in this part of the business.
I'm glad to hear that, but then also this might be in contradiction with what you said about the need for stability of the system. How is it going to impact the stability of the system? Can you deal with all these, individual connections? Is the local grid able to sustain this micro generation?
This is how to say it. To resolve to have kind of a new shiny world of decentralized energy system, it will be a result of many small but very important steps. What I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, it's one of these many steps, is somehow simplify the connection process, lower the fees, which especially apply to distributed generation. There are a number of other issues which need to be gradually resolved, and it's about, of course, as Juraj mentioned, just the installation capacity, the technicians who are available, but also there is a lot of issues about the permitting process, to get the construction permits, especially for wind in Slovakia. It's a nightmare, at least what I hear the stories of different developers. And this is not something which us as a regulator can do something about, but it's about different other institutions in this country which have a saying, or which define these kind of rules. And there is also a number of issues, as you mentioned, about whether we see the wind. It's also a question about the energy policy, because the energy mix is decided by energy policy set up by the Ministry of Economy, and I think at the end approved by the government. So whether we will set up or redesign, and I believe now there should be a process of redesigning the energy policy and the whole climate plan of Slovakia, which should kind of, and I believe it will create some more room for especially the renewable projects. So just to sum it up, don't expect revolution from the 1st of January next year, but I believe it's really the time to do a number of these steps in a relatively short order to kind of free up these framework for more decentralized generation.
So there is more like evolution, not really revolution, Mr. Krajcár.
Probably I will comment one thing, that if we have a micro generation, so we have a generation and consumption on one point of the point. There is a new technology coming to the energy system, and this is energy storage. So we're already having in place micro storages. Simply generation, consumption, and storage on one offtake points in one, let's say, production facility. This is number one. Number two, yes, of course, this is increasing heavily cost of the system, So, and we need to discuss with the regulator if we will find some technology from my point of view. It can be some big industrial battery storage, which we already discussing 2-3 years on the market, how we can put a huge battery storage into the system and stabilizing this cost. Specifically, energy which is produced during the sun day and put into the battery and stabilizing whole the system and not increasing the cost. So technology is coming. The question is if this will be paid back in which time, but this is also in connection with Andrej saying that what will be the fees and overall, let's say, market condition, how we can apply new technology into the system. So from the midterm, I'm really optimistic. From the short term, we need to save our energy. Once again, we need to save our energy. So this is the strong call for everybody who is sitting there here.
If I would like to create space for maybe direct questions, because there was one more question on Slido. If you have a question you would like to ask directly, is there someone?
Thank you very much. I would like to ask, Mr. Juris mentioned the deal with Slovenské elektrárne. Is there, under your view, any major roadblock or obstacle to make the deal, or also maybe from the perspective that the state has the authority to impose the general economic interest, and what is the risk that the deal will not be or will not materialize? Or thanks.
We as a regulator, we are not part of the discussions and negotiations with Slovenské elektrárne, so I cannot really tell you any inside or outside information about it. I can only say that I'm hopeful that this will be finalized in whichever ideally mutual agreeable way because of this importance which I mentioned, the impact on. I mean, from the information which I have not seen or heard about some showstopper, as I can say. It's really a matter of finalizing the details, and especially the detail which we said, I think on Monday we had a big meeting at the Ministry of Economy about how this electricity should be then distributed in a commercial sense from Slovenské elektrárne all the way through the suppliers to the households. And there is still quite a lot of work to be done, but I think it's not something which should not be manageable.
Maybe just to see how it's going to practically happen, it is based on the condition that Unit 3 will be phased in. So that means that there is like some kind of saved capacity which will be directed for households from Slovenské elektrárne. It's not sold on the free market, but it is kind of spare capacity which will be directed to households. But it's also conditional on the decision of banks to approve it. So there are some kind of ifs which must be met. I hope they will happen. But still, is this correct that it is really conditional that starting January 1st, Unit 3 will be phased in, and there is spare capacity to be set, and banks actually agree with that, correct?
As probably you know, I'm working for ZSZ, so I will not comment on commercial decision and commercial position of the Slovenské elektrárne, because this is definitely internal info. We can speculate on that, but I will not do that.
It's fair enough, of course. I just wanted to, complement the question which was posed, but based on the public information.
There is a market rumors, let's call it this way, but once again, I will not speculate because I really glad that Unit 3 will be in operation. So this is definitely good message to the market, and everything else is under the management of Mr. Striček.
maybe the question which was there but disappeared for some reason, there was a question whether we should somehow change the market mechanism, how the price is really determined, you know. Do you think that, you know, the current mechanism is simply not working and needs some kind of upgrade, or given the recommendations regarding, you know, stricter regulation or more efficient regulation, the current mechanism for price determination is okay?
There is several dimensions. One is price level itself. Second level is that if the wholesale market, which is from the 80% done via energy exchange, is okay or not okay. What's happened from the summer last year, that when the prices start to moving up, the energy exchange asking a lot of money, billions, quite high billions for collaterals to really somehow secure position on an exchange. And Slovenské elektrárne, ČEZ, and other producers come to the margining calls, which the financing banks need to send during the night billions of euro to the energy exchange. It means that these traders, producers, doesn't matter what kind of definition we will use, come to the insolvency, and state authority needs to step in. Specifically, if we're discussing about the ČEZ, if we're discussing about the other producers, if we're discussing about, probably heard about the German company Uniper. So that this is a very critical situation, that there is not enough, not just physical liquidity, but also financial liquidity. So my personal opinion that we're coming to the stage that we need to redesign our wholesale market. How? This is a good question.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Juris, you would like to also add a comment?
Just couple points to add. Again, it's a very complex topic, but to somehow simplify it, there is a lot of discussion about whether the market price, which is being set by the marginal source, at the moment it's mostly the gas-powered generation, whether this mechanism is good or bad. I mean, it has been tested, this mechanism in general, not only in energy markets, but especially in any kinds of markets, for hundreds of years. So in my view, it's no need to kind of set it. And the market price is just the symptom of some underlying problem. And these problems are not necessarily the way how the price is being calculated in the market, but the way how the markets or how the fundamental conditions of the markets work. We discussed the lack of generation, so basically there is a lack of supply. If you have a demand, but not enough supply, what the market price does, it goes up. It's kind of simple. Whether you have mechanism this or that, the price will just go up as long as you have some kind of a free market trading in any type of commodity. So the really we need to go into nitty-gritty detail of what are the problems of current design, and one of them, and I think there has been a really wonderful report of ACER, which is the energy regulator of the EU. Our colleagues, and I'm now doing the advertisement for them, but I believe they did a really wonderful job about analyzing the market design and what is really happening and what could be the solutions for the future. And one of the underlying and key issue is that we just have the current market is basically a short-term market. You can buy electricity for tomorrow or even for the next hour, maybe for next day, next month, 1 to 3 years. But if you want to build a new power plant generation, especially a big one, you need to have some kind of a contract for maybe 10 years, 15 years, for kind of medium to long term. And the current market design just does not kind of produce or generate the products for longer than 3 to 4 years. So one of the key elements of the change of the whole market design should be kind of introduction of a medium and longer term contracts, which especially industrial customers would like to buy and lock in the price of electricity maybe for 5 years in advance, maybe 10 years in advance, and there will be an kind of the counterpart from generation and maybe some trading institutions, which would provide them the supply for 10 years at the locked price. So this is one of the key elements. There are a number of things, but in my view, these are the things which need to be looked at and think about and improve.
You need also long-term money for that, so not every bank is willing to lend you the money for 20 years, especially if you have customers who are maybe currently doing fine, but in 10, 20 years, you have no idea whether this industry will survive in Europe. So it's very complicated, and it's a role for the state to play. Mr. Krajcár?
Yeah, I give you one wonderful example. When the hydro generation was built up in Switzerland, there was business case built on a 50 years payback. And if you have pay ahead market, and if you have financial guys standing behind your back, you never build up such a production facility. So this is definitely in connection with what Andrej is saying. We need to find the logic, how we will transform money for a long-term generation. And having 10 years business case, 15 years business case is something what we're seeing on a solar business. But if we going to the different kind of generation, for example, for a future of hydrogen, we definitely need to discuss more than 15 years. And how we can lock in, how we can bundle the long-term pricing with the long-term investment.
I see one question which is, again, somehow not very optimistic. Do you think that Slovak industry is facing potential blackouts or forced reduction of consumption during the coming winter? Mr. Krajcár, you said that basically that was a plea from your side that, we need to decrease the consumption. But it also brings me to the point many of you probably have on your mind, like if you have a boiler back at home, like whether there will be enough gas, whether, the storage, which is currently at the capacity of 84%, is that enough? Will there be, pressure sustained to get even this gas out of the storage, which is, here in Slovakia? And if there is no flow of new gas, are we okay in terms of, storage of gas, and the industry will be not under big pressure and there will be regulated consumption?
Industry is already under the big pressure. This is number one. So there is no question. Number two, we see already a decrease of the consumption. You mentioned Slovalco, there is a Istebne, there is other huge production facilities. So we are already on our reports seeing that the consumption is going down. This is number one. Number two, as everybody knows, the high prices, it means pressure on industry. And we know that we are facing recession. And recession, it means that consumption will go down because less production capacity, less produce goods, etc., etc. And why I'm asking to go drastically down with the consumption is if we will be able to do voluntary, we will be not faced or not forced by recession.
Does it apply also to consumption of oil? There is OPEC plus decision to cut, production by 2 million barrels per day. Is this something which is indicating coming recession? Saudis and Emirates, they are worried that there will be no consumption. Does it mean for us that if I go to the petrol station, I don't have an electric car, I apologize yet, but I would love to, but it's too pricey for me, So I'm still consuming diesel. Is this 1.8 euro I am paying currently the maximum price, you think, or we will see even higher prices? I know that Slovnav is there. We have a colleague here. He will probably not he's not allowed to speak on behalf of Slovnaft, but maybe your personal opinion, is this the maximum price we are paying, or is it going to reach the threshold of €2? And is already the consumption of oil, crude oil in Slovakia decrease, or is it simply recession just in the newspapers, but not really, you don't see it in your production and maybe sales? Maybe there's a question also for Mr. Juris. I know that you are basically somehow involved also in this, but of course we don't have anti-monopoly office here, etc. But I know it's probably not question for you, but still probably is on minds of many of us. So would you take this?
I can only say that, first of all, no crystal ball here. Yep. Have not found it yet. Second, thanks God we are not regulating oil prices. Thanks God. And I think there are so many factors ahead of us, a lot of unknowns to say anything about it. I think, at least from my side, would be very, very unresponsible. Yep.
You would like to answer that? Perfect, excellent.
Sure, thank you. Well, as already mentioned by the gentleman here, you have to look at the policy side and also on the market side here. So the story is rather complicated as well as with electricity, and you have heard that it's sort of connected to gas. So, and these two are oil and gas also connected. So it's sort of a back-to-back situation here. I will maybe start with electricity. For example, Fukushima, you mentioned Fukushima. I had an interesting discussion with the Japanese diplomatic corps here, and what they said about the current position in the energy market, they have, after Fukushima, they've shut off maybe 56 nuclear power plants in Japan, right? 9 of them are back in production, but the rest of the capacity is saturated by oil burning stuff. So just imagine how much oil needs to be taken from the market just for Japan, for energy production, for electricity, until they sort out the safety issues with the rest of the nuclear plants. By the way, also being a big fan of nuclear. So that's the connection with one of the connections. If you ask the Chinese or the Japanese on the position for, say, on the natural gas situation, especially with Russia, for example, with production stakes in Sakhalin 1 and 2, etc., the Japanese are not giving up their stakes because they don't want the Chinese to get into their shares. So it's all sort of connected geopolitically. Oh, and coming back to your oil question, of course, then the Saudis and OPEC are worried what is going to happen. They see a recession coming, as already mentioned. Some of the natural gas consumption going away from the market, also the crude oil production as well. You can see the turmoil, let's say, in Libya, Iran, the situation not being very stable, or Kurdistan as well, as part of Iraq. So they need to calculate and optimize for themselves. And this has been really nicely said by the Commission, Commissioner Kadri Simpson to be precise, last weekend, when she mentioned that, okay, she in part understands OPEC countries taking their own interest, as every country is doing, be it Russia, be it Saudis, be it Emirates, whoever, who is a big player. So everybody's optimizing their own risks. It's an open market. So for Europe, this means, okay, being a Saudi, why should I really be worried, right? No reason for that. And oil and gas productions are connected very often. So electricity, oil production, crude oil processing. Now coming to Europe, Europe is generally a huge importer of energy, be it hydrocarbon energy, nuclear, whatever. We are dependent on most of it. Currently, thanks to the war in Ukraine, we are short of 2 million liters of diesel fuel in the region. That's answering your question about the diesel price, okay? Because that needs to be imported into the region, which is not happening because of the sanctions. Sanctions, meaning cutting off supplies, imports of Russian produced. Okay, now everybody's thinking what will happen because we will need the energy somehow. Be it from Russia or from somewhere, but the refining capacity and the production capacities are limited and of course market oriented, as already mentioned. So yes, probably we will see a more increase in the prices. It goes hand in hand with gas, electricity.
It's a of Slovnaft, yeah.
Not really. As an established company, as any established company on the market, everybody's, I think, that's my belief, strives for price stability. So, you know, we do not really like to see the spikes, and it doesn't work for us, for the economy. We don't know how much we'll be paying for the crude oil next month. So not really. And then there was an accident in Schwechat in late spring, which meant that Schwechat refinery was down to 20% of refining capacity. So yeah, we were helping our colleagues from Schwechat, but we are unable to saturate the whole European market. It's simply impossible. Currently, you have a situation in France where 5 refineries are down because of strike. Labor unions in Total Energies. So the situation in the market is not really nice and rosy, to be honest. So this means that probably, yes, the prices will need to go up. And the question, of course, is, as with electricity, how to saturate the needs of the market. Because the Russian oil is not here. Okay, there are some rumors that India or China will relabel Russian products and get them into the union, because that's the way how the sanctions are designed, unfortunately. But we'll see. But unfortunately, also not really a very positive news for you here either, on the short term, of course.
Thank you for the bad news. Anyway, didn't expect much different, you know, so probably, as you know, the old saying goes, optimist is uninformed pessimist, yeah. And we have 2 more questions. Do you think Slovak industry, I think this one we already taken, so there is 1 more question. Will be there a partial solution for Malý Zdroj to deliver roof energy to the network in market price? This can involve some private resources. I think, Mr. Juris, this is a question for you.
Yeah, I think this good question, which relates to the new market rules and basically to the integration of this type of generation sources into the market, so they can sell their excess power into the market. Not necessarily to the network itself, because there's a grid operator, they should not purchase and sell the energy, but to the suppliers, to the traders of electricity. I think there is some potential already here, but I don't think for Malý Zdroj, but for other decentralized generation. But within the market rules, we are looking how to kind of extend and integrate these resources generally into the market.
Practical outcome is that you will need something what we're calling PPA contracts, or purchase power agreement with your supply company. And in this contract, you can agree on a price level what will be there. So this is number 1. And of course, as a generator source, you need to have responsibility for deviation. So we are combining this PPA contract with the contract responsibility for a deviation in one, let's say, approach towards local generators.
Okay, thank you.
It's already there, it's already running, and the price level is, of course, based on product which you are acquiring.
Anyone else feeling like asking a question directly?
Thank you very much. I would like to get back to the measures that can be imposed on the national level. You said that in order to assess whether such measures would be compliant with the internal EU market or the EU rules, you would need to see a specific proposal. But correct me if I'm wrong, but there had been such proposal that was scheduled to be discussed on the government level in late August, I think. And it dealt with the imposition of the obligations in the general economic interest with respect to the electricity produced from nuclear and hydro sources. So my first question would be whether such measure would be in compliance with the EU rules and the, let's say, spirit of the internal EU market. And the second question is, if such measures would be imposed now by the government and the ministry, could the agreement with the Slovenské elektrárne that is being negotiated, could it coexist with such measures? Or if the ministry were to impose such measures, does this mean that the negotiations with Slovenské elektrárne are done and the whole concept falls and is like finished? Thank you very much.
Very good questions. I think they should be addressed by the ministry because or other relevant government authority, because we as a regulator, we are not dealing or even do not have the competence to do any kind of measures, as you mentioned, the decision in it's a technical term, general economic interest. Yeah. But yes, in between August and September, there have been number of proposals on the table. From what I understand, they have been kind of taken out. There was no decision at the time on the government level because there was still a couple of unknowns and a couple of technical issues, which are, as I understand now, still being discussed. But from the information I have, one level of topic to be resolved is this contract between Slovenské elektrárne and the government to get this electricity at low price, at this 61.20 euros per megawatt hour, and whether it will be a contract or decision of the government or whatever measure, I don't know. Yeah, but there will be some kind of a form. Ideally, from my perspective, should be an agreement. But then there is a number of other measures which are related. It's about getting this electricity from Slovenské elektrárne all the way to the customer. And here, yes, we are discussing because the current normal kind of standardized framework for good weather, if I may say, does not have enough provisions which would enable this kind of extraordinary measure to be implemented. So at the moment, there is a discussion about the decision about general economic interest, with the nitty-gritty detail now being discussed and prepared, how this electricity should be transferred all the way to the customer, under what conditions, and so on. There has been this public information in media, whether there should be some kind of a motivation factor for saving of electricity or consumption by customer. There was something about 15% and so on. So these things are now being on the table, and I hope within a couple of weeks all these things will be finalized and adopted. Because just to give you the thing that it's really all these things, whether it's for the households, but also any kind of measure for the industry, the current framework, even for us as a regulator, does not allow us to do any kind of extraordinary measure. So it needs to be in a proper legal form, whether a decision in the economic interest, the general economic interest, which has its own legal statute in the EU and Slovak legislation, or this new legislation about the stav núdze, the emergency measure, which also needs to be adopted only by a specific decision of the government.
Probably I will comment one technical thing. As you know, that there is an agreement between the state and Slovenské elektrárne, and what was established was authority SPP as an agent. But SPP as a company is a part of the competitive market. So how the my competitor can get electricity from the Slovenské elektrárne directly to the SPP. And this is the reason why such a legal framework was established. So we need to be compliant. So this is not very easy how to transfer, and this is what Andrej mentioning, how to transfer legally electricity from Slovenské elektrárne to the end user. So this is quite complicated thing.
Any other question from the audience? I'm quite surprised. Okay, I see there is a hand raised.
Thank you. My name is Milan Garbier. I'm from Deloitte. I wanted to ask Mr. Juris about the regulation over the past 10 years, whether, because there are a lot of other factors which are affecting the price, for example, ETS trading, which I don't know whether there is a discussion about pausing all this market or stopping it during the times of emergency, but whether it is being discussed the future of the market as such, because in the end of the day, the energy markets are regulatory constructs. I mean, they were created in the environment which is a natural monopoly, and it is really a big question whether it is beneficial in the end of the day, because it makes it impossible to do exactly this kind of transfer as Mr. Krajcár just described.
Okay, ETS and the whole scheme and regulation around ETS, it's not competence of URSO, so I can only comment on the information which we have. We are not involved in the EU level discussion on that. I understand there is a topic how to somehow adjust, if I may say, the ETS scheme in a way to somehow lower the price of ETS or kind of create some more room or financial resources. One of the proposal which we saw in some draft document was to, and I'm not sure if I can say it exactly properly, that there is some kind of a reserve at the EU level of this ETS which could be released in the emergency and traded on the market, and the generated money from selling this extra release of ETS certificates will be used for compensation of businesses and households. But this is just one of the proposals. There are many other proposals from different countries. To be honest, we are not part of that, so I cannot even say where this discussion is and where it's headed. I would just only speculate, and I don't want to speculate. But I understand this is a big topic in the current discussion, and understandably, ETS. The cost of CO2 certificate is significant in the overall energy mix. I kind of heard or sensed another dimension in your question about the regulation of natural monopolies and such. I believe, and I think this is a completely different topic from the ETS as such. I mean, ETS is a special scheme, European-wide scheme, for the CO2 certificates, which has its own rules and logic and legislation. Natural monopoly regulation is dealing with mostly with the infrastructure in the energy sector, which has been there. And I believe unless there is some really huge change in technology, that we can have our own grid in our backyard easily created, it's still to be here with us for some time. And this is our kind of remit, if I may say. This is the job of regulator like us, like URSO, to really look at the costs and prices of these natural monopolies and make sure that they don't overcharge you. And they open their network to all these new, for example, new generation capacities. This is our job, and I believe this job will be there for some time.
Thank you. Any other question from the audience?
Again, maybe speaking from the industrial point of view, and many discussions we have had in the recent past, I think there is a general consent that the energy market needs to be sort of redesigned, and My feeling or my sensing of it is that it's going to go the way the financial market is being regulated. That's the current, let's say, buzzword in Brussels and around the Commission. So probably that would maybe answer colleagues' questions here. And I think it's a general call, maybe also from the industry as well, that we would like to see a more transparent and more predictable market so that you can invest and see many returns maybe in the future.
What I can comment on that in these days and these weeks we are solving a problem of next winter. But I'm more than sure that after the Q1 there will be a lot of meetings, a lot of workshops, etc., set up to prepare new design of the energy market, and it will be work for years. It will be not like done like this. So definitely, I already have some signals from the Brussels, so we already had some calls, discussion, etc., etc. But everybody concentrating on the actual issues. Everybody looking for money, for budget. If the additional regulation will come, who will pay it and how it will be paid, etc., etc. But once again, if the actual pressure will go down, and it will go down when the heating season will be stopping, and this is the end of the Q1, the whole process will start. And I'm dealing with some issues with the Brussels, and I can tell you it's a nightmare. And I'm not really optimistic that we will do this job quickly.
Mr. Juris?
If I could comment, I think that's an excellent point you made. And we see it, if we just look across the Atlantic to the US, I mean, the whole wholesale commodity trading is basically regulated by financial regulators. It's not the job of FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, kind of our counterpart, a little bit bigger than us, but of the financial regulator. And I think this is the trend and correct trend here, because the wholesale trading of the commodities has been kind of left out in a way, but it's an emerging way. Coming for a second back to our regulation of national monopolies, I think there is a lot of new, if I may say, even revolution there in terms of how to regulate it, these sectors, because also the distribution, transmission, all this kind of infrastructure need to convert themselves from this kind of heavy, conservative, sleepy, sometimes lazy monopolies into really kind of an open access platforms. Yeah, because we need this decentralized generation. We need the batteries, as Juraj mentioned. This new energy legislation, which was just adopted and came into force in October this year, opens up a lot of new solutions and a lot of new players in the energy market. And the grid, if I may say, is really a central focus point of providing the access and also the information data in something close to real time about all the transactions which are being made in the energy sector. So it's a big job for us as regulators to somehow adopt also the regulation in this sense.
So thank you very much. I think the time is up. So with that, I would like to thank our great speakers, Mr. Krajcár from Západoslovenská energetika, Mr. Juris from URSO. You asked at the beginning that the last questions will be easier. So maybe my last question is like, do politicians listen to your arguments? Are they able to follow the discussion? I learned a lot from this discussion. I hope the same holds for you. So are we having, politicians who are able to take brave decisions and get us through this difficult period, or not?
It's a question for you, right?
I mean, on the European level, of course. Okay, so I see that this is not really the question you really enjoy.
I'm happy to.
No comment, please, on that.
I'm happy. I think politicians, like any type of human beings, are human beings. There are people who are listening, and very carefully, and are willing to kind of learn and think about how to do. And there are also other types, if I may say. And thanks God for the first types. We had a lot of, and me personally had a lot of good discussions, and I'm hopeful. Otherwise, I would not be saying these things. I'm really hopeful that these things will kind of extraordinary measures will be put in some kind of reasonable shape so we can survive the winter.
Thank you very much, and I also would like to thank you for coming here, paying attention, asking questions. Please stay loyal to MCHEM. We are having some new events in the pipeline. Next week we are organizing an event on Monday about digital solutions, how to finance digital solutions within your company. I think this is really in line with what Mr. Krajcár said. We need to save, and digitalization is really about saving also energy consumption. So please join us for that. We are also having a discussion. I think it should be on the 25th of November or October, so it's not yet announced, but it will be soon, about geopolitical risk. I think many of these things which we discuss require perfect foresight, strategy foresight, how to get ready for the next crisis. And I think this is really seriously lacking in our region and in Europe in general. So then we are not surprised by black swans so much as it was the last time. Thank you very much once again, and I would like to also thank our partners, Západoslovenská energetika and Slovnaft, member of the MOL group. Sorry. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.